roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd. You came into my life and started a fire. You made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're my desire. Now all I have to do is to make you mine. 'Cause I know, and you know what we could be. Like a song, like a perfect melody. Baby, don't say you don't believe in me. 'Cause you know, and I know, we're onto something good. You know, and I know, we got something good.
Hello, you got me bopping to the music a little bit. Hello, everyone. My name is Bonnie Violet. I'm a trans femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, and digital chaplain. Just in case you're coming across me for the first time and you have found yourself at Say Something Sundays, which is a series that this is the second time I've done this series. And basically, the idea is for me to say something on Sunday. And really kind of, an opportunity for me to reflect or share experience or thoughts on different things. In the past, I talked about like a desire for God versus desperation for God, or my inheritance, what it's like, what I was taught, what came before me. And there were a couple others. As many of you know, this week was Trans Day of Visibility. The date technically was on Friday, but there were a number of events and situations throughout the week that kind of culminated to the whole week of activities. I myself had something to do for six days in a row related to Trans Day of Visibility in so many different variations. And through that process, some questions and thoughts have come up, and I was just kind of trying to think in summary, what has Trans Day of Visibility meant to me this year. I don't recall. I guess where I would like to start is I have a podcast called Splintered, which you may or may not be aware of. This is a podcast that I created with my Aunt Tina, who is a conservative Christian who lives in Maricopa, Arizona. She is a conservative Christian, and she is probably one of my biggest allies and one of my nearest and dearest friends. We started out that way when we were young. She actually got me started into church when I was like 5 or 6. And then, life happened. She's a little older than me. And so she, basically life happened. Eventually, I came out as being gay, and I was diagnosed with HIV. And from then on, for about 20 years, our relationship was estranged. And prior to that, I was like living with her. I was taking care of her kids. I was involved in church stuff with her. So we were super, super, super close. And then all of a sudden, everything changed. I had told her that I was gay, and she didn't really respond to that well. And so it just kind of created a rift for us, a rift that lasted 20 years. But a few years ago, we just started being in relationship with one another again. And she is one of the only people in my family who call me by my name and use the pronouns that I prefer, and the pronouns that people that are closest to me in my life use for me and have used for me for years. But anywho, one of the things that I love about my aunt and I's relationship and our ability to do a podcast is we try to show up as authentically and real as we can, and with one another. And we both have two very different point of views, even though we grew up in the same little town in Wendell, Idaho. And so this week we focused on Trans Day of Visibility and wanted to talk about trans visibility and what our like what our understanding was of it, throughout our lifespan, and then kind of to where it is today. And we kind of we started talking a little bit how like we didn't see trans people that we were aware of, growing up where we grew up, and in the years that we grew up. We both grew up. She grew up as a teen in the 80s, and I grew up as a teen in the 90s. And at that time, we just didn't know of people. I'm sure there were people around us who were trans, but it was a different time. And, check out the podcast. You can hear us talk a little bit more about that. But one of the questions that she came up with was, well, why does there need to be a day of trans visibility? And it was a very like genuine question. And I think it's one that a lot of people have, or a lot of people might think, why do we need this day? And like, who is this day for, or whatever? And with that question, for me as a trans person who's transitioned much later in life, I believe that a lot of that happened because I did not see transness in the environments that I was in. I didn't see or hear about them in church. I didn't see or hear them at school. And even when I moved on to, moved into my more adult life, living in Phoenix, and kind of becoming part of the broader LGBTQ community, and identifying as a gay man for so long, mainly because I just didn't, I don't know, I just knew that I wasn't, I don't know, it just seemed like as a flamboyant or feminine person that was assigned male at birth, that, that must mean that I'm gay, or that seemed like a safer place for me to exist in. And I had lots of internalized transphobia that I can see now, that kind of played out in my relationships throughout the years, with other trans people, with drag in particular, and just even with myself. And one of the things that drag has really helped me to do, well, I'm not quite sure where I was going with all that, but basically the why, one of my responses was, like, it's important for me, as I was starting to say, not seeing myself reflected in the world left me searching, and it left me feeling incomplete in some ways. And for me, and I have a couple of other videos that I talked about around touch and my experience with transitioning. And as I've transitioned, I realized I've been able to actually deal with a lot of the trauma and trauma response from my childhood, that I don't know, it's interesting. Once I started hormones, and again, there's other videos I'll put in the description where you can hear me talk about it a little bit more. But basically, as I started hormones and started transitioning, I'm actually feel like I'm like residing in my body, and I have a relationship with my body that I don't recall really ever having in my life. And I feel like I've lived a good part of my life disassociated and kind of in my head, or just not really having a great relationship with my body, and maybe just a connection with it. So yeah. So through this opportunity of transitioning, I'm coming to just realize how much I've missed out on, I guess. I try not to dwell on it too much, because I'm grateful for the life that I've lived, and who I am today, and who knows what created me, in this way. I think life has a way of happening to us, and we become products of life and things that happen to us, no matter how much we try. And, for much of my life, I was just a victim to life and I felt like I couldn't do much about the fact that that life was happening to me. And sometimes I'd be resentful that I felt like, especially when I had like sexual assault or trauma responses to things that were still playing out in my life in ways that were toxic or not helpful to me. I really struggled with that, and I fought with that. I resented it. Um, and the last few years, I've been able to really kind of um, get to a space where I can acknowledge and these things that have happened to me. And yes, they have created responses and reactions uh, with life, but also it's also helped me to. Sorry, I keep seeing the connection coming and going. So I don't know how things are looking for folks who are watching live. I do apologize. Um, the internet connection seems to just not be so great. Um, and of course, I'm going to lose my train of thought, but that's kind of, I think, a part of what this process is going to be is just me having an opportunity to kind of just share where I'm at with things. So visibility has been so important to my journey to to find myself. Uh, just to kind of push it through a little bit further. I also had an opportunity this week, kind of thinking about childhood and stuff. I got a call from a pastor in Portland that I worked with in the past who asked that if I would like lip sync or sing a song for a church event with family around drag and transness. And I happened to be getting in drag already for my interview with Amelia, Blayke, who is a trans drag queen who grew up in the Twin Falls area, which is where close to home. It's close to where I am from originally. In any way, this pastor had asked me to sing, I think it was "You Are My Sunshine" or something like that, and I said, well, can I lip sync and can I do it in drag and can I actually do This Little Light of Mine? This Little Light of Mine is a song that is more. It's my nephew's song. My nephew Wyatt Hades died close to 10 years now, I think, around 10 years, I believe, ago. And when at his funeral, the song that we picked was This Little Light of Mine because Wyatt Hades stands for light in the darkness. And so whenever I get a chance, I really like to I don't know, lean into that connection because I feel like um, that little person really changed me in big ways, in spiritual ways. I think that my spirituality got deeper and my drive to being more integrated as a queer person and a spiritual person, and really trying to hold those two identities at the same time. Two identities that were thought to be um, contrary to one another. And that's looked different throughout the years. Like I said, it's been almost a decade now. So a lot has happened, but I'll also include that video clip in the link if you want to check out the lip sync to This Little Light of Mine. But it was just kind of like one of those full circle moments, and that also takes me back to this idea of, I try not to think too much about like what it would have been like if I could have started transitioning earlier, like what it would have been like if my um, parents, allowed me to be feminine or saw that I was trans or that, whatever. I mean, they didn't know it was an option. I didn't know it was an option. I've shared I don't really remember much of my childhood, but that was one of the things I got to share in that drag video as well. It was with This Little Light of Mine. They also did a little interview about like, what would you say to parents of kids who want to do drag or whatever, and I was just kind of like, well, just like, just encourage them And I think for me, one of the things is I didn't get a chance to do that when I was younger. And I think to some degree, drag allows me to do some inner child work, to be honest with you, to try to find some playfulness, to tap into that inner child and letting her be her a little bit more, which is interesting. It was an interesting thought that kind of came to mind that is part of the magic of drag for me later in life, and really coming to a place of trying to be more, again, kind of trying to have a new experience with the life that I've lived and the life that I've been, given. Um, yeah. And so I was kind of interested. So I think that's for me, drag, a big part of drag is to get to a space of play and to get to a space of feminine expression. It's also what's allowed me, to understand that I am trans and to really live into that. Drag was like an excuse for me to express myself in ways that felt good, felt really vulnerable, but it's hard to explain. But I'd never felt again so connected to my body and in my body and happy with my body and what was on it and how I looked and things like that. And again, I never thought I was like, I used to always say I never thought I was an attractive person or whatever. I was just kind of there. And I think I was just starting to have an experience with myself that was like, I'm more than just there. My body is more than just here. And try to get to know it a little bit more. And that's been one of the gifts of transition. And so I know this is kind of a little all over the place. And if you're watching live and if you have questions or want to direct me, that is cool as well. I did write some notes so that I could kind of bring up some of the other things, but I also got an opportunity to go to a rally, which also kind of speaks to this childhood and what if I would have known sooner, but I'm transitioning later in life. And again, I want to reiterate that I'm not dwelling on like something that I missed out on, but it is just an experience that I didn't have. And I was at this rally for Trans Day of Visibility here at the Anne Frank Memorial in Boise. And it was like a last minute thing that I went to. And I was so glad that I ended up going. And it was also challenging. There was a lot of young people. There were a lot of like teenagers and preteens, maybe. They're probably like 12, 13, I'm assuming. I don't know. As we get older, everyone looks so much younger. But they were sharing their experiences as being trans kids and growing up as trans kids and just with their families. And there was a lot of like pride and confidence and strength in them. And there was a lot of fear and a lot of really difficult emotions and feelings. And with all the laws that are happening right now and just how it is just being in the world with, whether it's teachers or classmates and there were some tears shared and some, kids had talked about unaliving themselves, and which was just, the other side of the coin, I guess. And there was an element of me when I was leaving, I was reflecting with one of the folks that I went with and was like, maybe me not knowing I was trans when I was a kid was in some ways a gift. In the sense of, I don't know how, I couldn't imagine how I would have coped with that knowing of myself, given, the time and the home and the town and the place that I was, and nobody, and that was one of the things that has kind of come up a lot over this week as well too, in my interview with the drag artist who's trans, who's from the area that I grew up in. And then I had another interview with a therapist and another friend of mine about transness kind of growing up, and my parents did amazing job with me, you know, and they did everything they could to raise me to be you know, to be a good person, you know, and some of that was not allowing my femininity or, you know, things like that, but they didn't know any better and they didn't know any different. And so I can't imagine if I would have pushed that more, because even when my dad was trying to I think, I mean, I don't even know how I read it, but I guess it was just like when I wasn't being man enough. I think I had that sort of knowledge, um, but I don't know. It's so interesting how you can see it now. But I just saw it as like I wasn't quite man enough, or I wasn't man in the right ways, and it made me really insecure about my expression. Um, but I wonder what it would have been like, or I thought maybe it was good that I didn't say, Dad, I'm a girl, or Mom, I'm a girl, or, you know, at that age, or growing up in the school that I did. And, you know, and again, it's no, like, nobody's an asshole. Nobody's like, you know, nobody's like a monster. Harm happens in life, even when we're trying our best to show up for people. And um, I don't know, it just kind of got me thinking a little bit more of like, well, maybe it's a good thing I didn't know when I was younger. Even though it feels like transitioning much later in life, it feels like I could have avoided so much. You know, like, I don't know, there's just so much of my life that could have been different, that might have, you know, kept me from sexual assaults, or kept me maybe even from getting HIV or addictions. Like, I don't know. Um, so I really do try not to dwell on um, that too much, because that's not my experience. But I do think for me, being a part of Trans Day of Visibility in particular, and for me, kind of doing these events is, you know, I hope that people younger than me are getting to have a different experience, and that if me, you know, being willing to show up and say I'm trans, or I mean, I'm just freaking existing. But if my existence can help somebody else not have to go through what I went through, to maybe feel less isolated, or maybe to avoid some sort of trauma, or to whatever that sort of thing is, because I know how important it was for me to eventually find that and see that for myself. And it took me a long time um, to find that. There's so many people who, I remember, like, there are plenty of trans people who are people who saw me before I saw me. I remember I remember a trans woman telling me, like, you know, girl, this was back when I was like, I had a beard and I just thought I was like a bearded lady, so to speak. I didn't realize I was trans. I didn't identify that way. But I was definitely leaning into my femininity a little bit more, and like wearing skirts and dresses and, you know, things like that in public. And I remember one of the girls saying, you know, girl, like, you just take some moans, it'll soften things right up. And I was like, oh, you know, like, that's not me. I'm not that girl, you know. And um, I've always kind of had a heart, especially later in life, for the trans community in general as a whole. I remember somebody thinking I was a trans man at one point in my life, which was interesting, that it was kind of the other way around. But I could, you know, I understand that now. And I didn't see it as, actually saw it as kind of like a compliment in some ways. I just felt like it was interesting. I think somebody maybe did see me, um, and could see me when I couldn't. Um, where am I at with this? I Well, Trans Day of Visibility, I'm reflecting on. I took some notes here, um, with the rally and everything, and, you know, kind of in response to that question, like, why Trans Day of Visibility, or why do we need the day? And um, I remember saying to my aunt, I think, is like, maybe it's not for you, maybe it's for us, maybe it's for other trans people. what non-trans people do with that day, I guess, is up to them. My hope is that maybe they would see more of us and see us in our fullness, and see us in our diverse variety of expressions, and the things that we do in our lives, is the ways that we look, the jobs that we do, the projects we work on, the families that we have, and our relationships that we're in, that there's such a vast, like, pool. Like, there's just so many of us. There's so many ways to live as a trans person, is what I'm trying to say. I kind of think I felt for a long time I wasn't trans enough to be trans, and that's something I've heard a lot of trans people say over the years, is that, like, I didn't, or I'm not trans enough, or that sort of thing. And there's no one way to be trans. It doesn't have to be so binary, though it can be. And for me, it's just kind of an exploration. And for me, living into my trans identity is a spiritual awakening. I often say, when people started calling me she at first, I was like, don't call me she. I'm a boy. That was my transphobia. Eventually, people started calling me she, and I felt seen. I felt like you were seeing what was inside of me. You were seeing the things that I wasn't able to let out or have out in public. And so I remember thinking it was a term of endearment. And I remember also thinking that I couldn't use she pronouns because I wasn't that, I wasn't a trans woman in that way. And then I realized that my she doesn't take away from anybody else's she. Like, there's enough she for everyone, so to speak, which kind of leads also to the idea of this Trans Day of Visibility. It's like, it isn't about, I think sometimes people feel left out, or feel like, we're wanting to be special, or we need whatever. And I think it's because it was even brought up about, why not have like a Christian visibility day or whatever. From my perspective, I feel like there's a lot of Christian visibility, but I also think, again, there's so many ways to be Christian. And even a conservative Christian. My aunt is a conservative Christian who supports me as a trans person and loves me as a trans person. So maybe having, some visibility of different ways of being Christian would be good and would be beneficial. So I just encourage people that, or just in general, I think that's why visibility or representation kind of matters. And if maybe it's helpful to think of it as a sense of like a birthday. It's like, we all have birthdays and we all have moments that it's about us, so to speak. But it doesn't take away from somebody else's. It shouldn't take away anything from anyone else's ability to celebrate themselves and life in general, or all that sort of stuff. I'm coming up on, this month will be 2 years since I've been on hormones. So I'm really just kind of landing in my, so I guess I thought I just wanted to say that. I feel like I'm kind of rambling a little bit, and that's okay. But I am going to attempt to do this series on a weekly basis, where I plan to come on and say something. So if you want to join me live, I would love it. You can have questions and comments during the show, or if you listen to a podcast after, or you watch it on YouTube, please engage, ask questions, leave comments. A lot of what I get in the comments are not things I want to be reading. So it's always great to get comments that are, I don't know, it's just nice to hear more positive things from folks, or even if just people have questions or want to know more of something. So I'll work on getting out some of my topic ideas in the future. If you have things you'd like to hear me talk more about, whether it's a topic, or maybe it's a part of my story, or a part of my history, or maybe even a part of my future, I would love to begin to speak to some of that a little bit more. I think I find it good for me. And I think it is also part of that visibility, that maybe others will see themselves in me in some way, and again, feel less isolated and feel more a part of, and feel more willing and able to expand their expression and their understanding of self and their ability to share that with the world. I'm going to go ahead and play the music. I want to thank my Patreon members who support my work on a monthly basis. I will put them in the credits at the end of the show, and they were in the beginning. If you're interested in supporting my work, it would be greatly appreciated. The sound might not be so great because my headset broke, and I'm just not in a position to really replenish some of that stuff. So if you want to help support the work of, my work, that a lot of it is done digitally, or if you would like to work with me in some way, I love to speak or show up in drag, or, all that sort of fun stuff. I don't want to make this like a plea or an ask kind of thing, but I do need the support of the community in order to kind of continue going. And support is subscribing to my channels, or again, leaving comments, or rating me on podcasts, or, there's so many ways that you can support me in my work. Sometimes it does feel really isolating, and it's sometimes difficult for me to keep doing these things on a weekly basis, especially when I don't have engagement. So please engage. And a lot of that is just like, a lot of this is I'm seeking connection as well in kind of putting myself out in the world in this way. There's still a lot for me that I'm seeking, and I'm trying to find and trying to come to understand. So I love talking with people about their experience and their spirituality, because I've shared this often too, my understanding of God and the world and why things are the way they are. Like it fails me often. And lately it's been challenging to know what it is what am I going to pray to, if I'm going to pray to, or what actions am I going to take knowing that I'm connected with everyone else in the world. And, how can I show up with love and compassion to all people, even the people who want me to not exist in the ways that I do. Anywho, I wanted to keep this right at 33 minutes. That's where we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye, and join me next week. Same time, same place, or listen to me wherever you listen to me. Take care, and I love you. Bye-bye. Oops, wrong button.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd. You came into my life and started a fire. It made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're mine.